Welcome to a podcast about the adventures of a divorced entrepreneurial father. Now, this is a hub of stories, cautionary tales, and life lessons behind the daily struggle to do better and be better and ultimately to find new sparks in life. And even if no one listens to any of these episodes, but I leave something behind for my children that sparks something in or even for them, well, that's good enough for me. However, if you do like what you hear on SparkHub, please support us by linking to the show notes below each episode. And once you're there, please consider subscribing to this podcast on the platform of your choice. And for the best experience, our newsletter gives you the inside scoop, exclusive content, and advanced previews of what's coming next. And by the way, your data is always private with us. We don't sell it, and you can unsubscribe from all of that at any time you want without judgment. So let's begin. My name is Alan, and I have a heck of a story for you. In this episode, we're going to talk about what health is wealth means. It's not just a cliche expression. If you're not healthy, you can't be wealthy. And I don't mean necessarily in terms of money. I mean in terms of mental health, physical health, spiritual health, all of those things. What I've done with this episode is my ex and I, after we divorced, we were hoping to sell our house quickly and move on with our lives. But our house took a very long time to sell, and I'll get into the details behind that later. But what I did along the way is that every couple of months, I would just record a voice note into my phone about how I was feeling on a particular day. And what you'll notice if you listen to this full episode in order is that each timestamp, if you will reflect a mind state of someone who was suffering and frozen in time and in purgatory the longer this situation dragged on. And I knew I wasn't alone because there were other people in my immediate surroundings as well as friends overseas who were going through the very same thing, being stuck in a house they couldn't sell or stuck in a living arrangement they couldn't move on from with their ex, and often with children involved. So it's a sticky situation. But then at one point, I had a panic attack, and I'd never had one before. And we'll get into the details around what happened later in the episode, but before that point, I'd like to stitch these voice notes together so you can see over time what was happening, what I was thinking, and also this is a record for my children, if they ever listen, to know what Daddy was going through. About 5 or 6 days after my panic attack, one of my oldest friends was in the UK from Canada. His name is Nav, and I've known Nav since I was 8. And Nav and I have always been, within reason, in touch and helping each other out. And Nav is, dare I say, quite a good philosopher. And he's always someone that's given me positive reinforcement and positive perspective every time I see him or speak to him. And he happened to come through where I lived, and we spent the day together. And we decided to record an episode of this podcast together, reminiscing about where I came from. Because in remembering where I came from and how I was when I was younger, and what's changed around me, and doing it with someone that came up alongside me, it really, really helped put me on a better path mentally to get over the panic attack I had suffered. And literally, the day after I suffered it, we've had an offer on our home. So, with a little more time and a little more perspective, I'm hoping everything's going to change for the better. But I wanted to capture this snapshot in time, both of the months that I was waiting to sell the home, as well as my friend Nav sitting with me and talking about the old days and how we currently struggle in the current times.
And don't wear the weight of the whole world. Like we said earlier, right? The plane's going down. Put that mask on yourself first so that you're in a position to not crumble and everyone comes crumbling on top of you. Take care of yourself. If you're taking care of yourself, then yes, you are in a better position to take care of those around you.
So let's get into it. It's April 1st, 2025, and I'm sitting in a forest near my house with my dog on a dog walk, and I'm wondering how many other people think that there was once a dream and then it became a nightmare, and how do you get it back to a happy dream? And that's what's going through my mind as I sit in this forest. Not far from this forest is a house, a 4-bedroom detached house in the countryside, and down the road from that house are my kids' elementary or primary school. And my ex and I fought our way out of a tiny flat in London through an apartment in Islington, 3 houses, and ended up here. And now it's all coming apart. And I'm just sitting here on April Fool's Day 2025, wondering if there's a joke or if I'm a fool. And ironically, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't know if my microphone is picking up background noises, but you should hear the sound of birds. And if you don't, then just imagine they're there. And I'm walking my dog on this beautiful spring day, thinking October 2023, which is over a year and a half ago, is when my ex asked to separate and divorce. By January, we'd filed with the court. By July, we put our house on the market, July 2024, and then by September 2024, we were officially divorced with a financial order in place. But we're still living in the house together with our 2 kids. My oldest is now 12 and my youngest is 9. He's about to become 10, and it's tense. There's no other way to put it, and I'm not trying to put blame on anyone. It's just a tough situation because you're living with someone you pledged your life to, and you living with the 2 children you created in a house that is full of their memories and their childhood, and it all has to be downsized at some point. We just don't know when, and we don't know where. We know generally where, but and that's a World War II plane now flying over my head. So talk about history. So what next? Where does it all go? What do you do? I just feel like I'm in purgatory right now, but I know I'm not alone, and I know that even if my timeline feels long, I've spoken to others that have had longer timelines, and I even just read an article in the Times the other day saying there is a huge amount of people who are divorced or separated, but they still have to live together because they can't afford to live apart or downsize, or the finances won't stretch, or there's instability in their income, and we tick all those boxes. And it's not a consolation, but it's a statistic that proves that we're not alone. And my friends in Canada I'm in touch with, and my friends in the US and Dubai and Saudi Arabia and Singapore, and in many different ways. Some are richer, some are poor, some have kids and some don't, some are married, some aren't, but they're all living through some form of desperation, dreams that have turned into nightmares. And yet my ex and I still have to live together and pay bills, and that's hard. There's unforeseen costs. We took our car in. I took the car in and got a service for a very large sum of money, only to be told I needed to spend more money to get some tires changed, and it just feels like the hits just keep on coming. So what do? I take dog walks with Doodles, who's a beautiful little dog we bought in COVID to bring the family together and get us out the house. I guess, if I'm really honest, the nightmare of being divorced and living under the same roof until we can sell our house is on top of the years of COVID, where that house became a school and a prison and a workplace and an entertainment place, and it was changed. And now I walk the dog alone most days, which is not a bad thing. I get out, clear my head. I do voicemails for my friends. I receive voicemails, and I listen to men and women who are dear to me and who have kids and are divorced, and they're all struggling in different proportions. And they're all feeling the same, a sense of desperation, a sense of fatigue. And I think we all ask ourselves that question: is that dream that you can have it all, is that a lie? That you can run your own business and be successful, that you can be wonderful parents, that you can raise your kids in an amazing environment, that you can achieve anything you put your mind to. I'm 48 years old and I still believe in all that stuff. I just don't know why it's taking so long, or if anything's going to get better or change. When will everything I dreamed of, when will everything my ex dreamed of, when will everything my children dream of come true? When it will come to bear? Am I in the right place at the right time for the right opportunity? All of this goes through my head every day on this beautiful spring day in 2025. And I don't know if I'll be here next April, to be honest with you. We thought we'd celebrated our last Christmas in our home 2 years ago, and we thought we'd be out by the next Christmas, and we weren't. And we're already a third of the way through 2025. And if I know anything about selling homes, it's that it takes forever. even when you get a deal, it can all fall through. So I just put one foot in front of the other. I take dog walks, and I communicate with other people who are going through the same thing. And I wonder where my tribe is. I've certainly got a lot of dear friends who have global people who are in touch with me, and I feel blessed to know these people and to have such long-standing friendships. And any one of you who are listening, hopefully you have good people in your life that will come and help you out when you're down and give you hope when you're sitting alone in a forest, wondering how much longer you're going to have access to this forest, or rather not have access to it, but live near it, and why your children don't want to play in it anymore. They're growing up too quick. They're growing up too quick. But spring is in the air, and that means renewal. And hopefully I have to hold on to that there can be renewal and there can be hope. And let's see what the next hour, week, month, year brings. And one day I hope, if anyone's listening to this and it's my children, I just want you to know I'm doing my best to make everything happen. And that's the best I can do. I'm sitting in a hotel room in Reno, Nevada, and it's the end of April. And I think before this recording, I put another recording that I made in the woods on the 1st of April, which was April Fool's Day. And I don't remember everything I said. I haven't listened back to it, but I just remember sitting in the forest a month ago, alone with my dog, alone with my thoughts, still living under the same roof with no prospect of when we were going to sell our home and be able to move on with our lives, and just recording something. And then a month later, I'm in Reno, Nevada, and a couple of things happened, which I'll talk about now. And I'm trying to capture these as sort of time capsules, moments in time to capture the journey for myself as much as my children and for the SparkHub podcast. This is just a bit of a stream of consciousness, so please bear with me, but I hope you find some interesting sparks in here. The common thread of whatever I recorded at the beginning of April and where I am now is I'm still alone. This time I'm just in a different location on the other side of the world. I took a 12-hour flight from London to San Francisco and then decided to drive from San Francisco to Reno, Nevada, because it's about 3.5 hours and it sure beats sitting in an airport waiting for a connecting flight. Plus, I like road trips. I'm from Canada. I like open roads and nature, and this was exactly what I needed. Although I was dog tired, the drive was good. Gives you time to think. And it just reconnected with me a little bit with my roots in the sense that I drove through some beautiful mountains and there was some snow. Even though it's April, it was still snowy in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous trip. And I was looking at this feeling a little bit lucky. One, that I'd secured a US client, which would be helpful financial wise, but also just to expand my horizons. But also because of the view I was looking at. But I was also sad because you don't have a family not to take them traveling with you, and it's difficult to be overseas when you're married with kids, but it's even more difficult to be overseas when you're divorced with kids. And that's what I was just struggling with. Even though the scene had changed, I still felt lonely and disconnected. Be that as it may, I drove through the mountains and it was helpful, and I sent some photos back home. And something interesting happened. If I flash back to my 20s, my brother Simon and I headed out west in 1998, and in the year 2000. In 1998, we worked in Banff, Alberta, and in 2000, we worked in Whistler, British Columbia. Both of them world-renowned resorts, all-season resorts. And it kind of reminded me of that, being on that road, on that big road that cuts through big North American highways and cuts through big woodlands and cuts through big snowy mountains. And I just felt like I'd gone back in time nearly 30 years. And then I arrived in Reno. Now, just as a bit of a backstory, when I worked in Whistler, there's something that happened to me that I'll never forget that sort of repeated here in Reno 28 years later. When I worked in Whistler, I was a doorman, and I would receive guests at the door, park their cars, take their bags to their room, and it was a wonderful trade because you made loads of tips, and we had lots of Americans coming up who always tipped big. And it was great. It was one of the best times of my life with my brother working in the ski resorts and just making money and partying and having fun and just living life in nature. And one time
a guest came out of the hotel to have a smoke. Now, Whistler used to host loads of conferences from all over the world, and especially from America. They could be tech conferences, sports conferences, whatever, but it was a beautiful location to have a conference. And in this particular case, Microsoft was having a conference, and a gentleman walked out to the front door to have a cigarette. And I struck up a conversation, because that's what you do when you're a doorman. You get to know your guests. And chatting with this guy a little bit, and he asked me what my story was. And I said, well, I'm 20 years old. I've graduated from police college, and I've graduated with a business degree from university, and I'm just taking a year out to just figure out what I want to do. And he looked at me and he said, you have no idea who I am, but I envy you. And I said, sorry, should I know who you are? And he said, well, I'm the number 3 at Microsoft. I work with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, and I won't say my name, but I'm kind of behind the scenes. But I envy you. He says, I'm nearly 50 years old. I'm out here smoking. I've had ulcers. I've had 2 to 3 ex-wives. My children don't want to speak to me anymore. And I just dedicated my whole life to going to school and working my way up the corporate ladder. And don't get me wrong, I've done well in life. But I look back and I said, if I were 20 again, I would love to take a year off and work the front door at a ski resort. So, kid, I know you're worried about your future. I know you're worried about your job and how you're going to make money and what your career is going to look like. But trust me, enjoy your time now while you're 20 out here in Whistler. You will never get this time back, and enjoy. And that conversation really, really changed my mind, because for 6 years prior, I had been in school and work full time. I was studying and working full time. I got 2 degrees. I was ambitious. I wanted to find some great job. And Whistler, I felt like, was I wasting my life? But that confirmed to me that it wasn't. It was a sign. And so after that moment, I decided to go to Australia, and I was supposed to go for a year. I ended up going for 2, and then I moved back to Montreal. And from that point forward, it led me to a whole bunch of adventures through Israel and eventually to London. So, talk about sliding doors, no pun intended. I opened the door for this guy, and he gave me a lesson in life. So now flash forward to me pulling up to Reno, Nevada, where at the hotel where I'm staying, and I'm greeted by a young doorman who's chatty, 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 and I couldn't help myself. And I said, you know what, man, I used to do this job 28 years ago. I was standing on the front door of Shadow Whistler, parking cars, and let me tell you something, enjoy this time. And he asked me, he said, what do you do? Because I was dressed in a suit. And I said, well, I'm here for business. I've just flown in, and I've got some meetings starting tomorrow. But yeah, I'm an entrepreneur and I run a consultancy. And he went, wow, man, I really want to do what you do. I'm dreaming of starting my own business. I'm dreaming of doing all these things. And I said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 20. I said, my first piece of advice, slow down. Don't have an ulcer. Take your time, figure out what you like to do, and just try everything. Travel if you can, because you'll never get this time back in your life. And he went, man, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. You've really given me something to think about. So I find that odd that a month ago, I'm sitting in the woods in England, contemplating my future, worrying. Then I got a contract to come to the US to do some work. I end up taking a trip down memory lane, down a highway, through some mountains to the other side to meet a doorman who reminded me of myself 28 years ago. I don't know where this story leads. I don't know if it's valuable, but I thought it was worth capturing for this time capsule episode, because a lot can change in a month, just as much as a lot can change in 28 years or 40 years. It felt like yesterday I was running the front door of the Shadow Whistler and dreaming big and thinking about who I was going to meet and marry and what my kids were going to be like and where I would take them and if I would ever take them to Whistler, or maybe they would work the front door in their 20s. Who knew? But man, how much the world has changed. And I really, 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 really miss my kids. And I hate being this far away, but I have to do it for myself and for them, as well as for my ex as well in a small way. I wonder what's going to change in the next month. I wonder if we'll sell our house. I wonder what's next. But it just amazes me sometimes to see how one decision you make, one conversation you have can change the trajectory of your whole life. And who knows? Maybe I've just had a conversation with a kid and changed his life. Maybe one day he'll make a podcast about the tired looking guy in a suit who pulled up and told him about the time he worked at the Shadow Whistler.
Well, it's been exactly 1 month since I sat down to record a stream of consciousness in the English countryside near my house on April Fool's Day. So it's May 1st today, and I'm sitting at the Montreal airport waiting for my bag to arrive. I've just come from Denver and before that Reno. I'm still sitting thousands of miles away in a busy airport and just reflecting on how much has changed in a few weeks and another stream of consciousness. But I was invited by a new American client to fly to Reno, Nevada for a few days to help them design a new business, which is obviously very exciting. And whilst it is exciting from a career point of view, it's also necessary really to keep paying the bills back in the UK while we're still living together. And the business trip was a mixture of business and pleasure. My hosts took me to Virginia City, which is like a mining town in the hills. It feels like I went back in time to cowboy times. And they also took me to the beautiful Lake Tahoe, which I just cannot describe. It was just beautiful, and I'm going to put some photos of it on the episode show page, which you can see if you open up the show note link below. And I should be feeling good. I'm home in many ways. I'm in my other home where I grew up, but I'm far from the home I set up in the UK. And I guess this time capsule is repeating a theme. I just feel lonely and worried, but hopeful. In the macro sense, the whole reason I set Are You My Wife up was to meet a partner and have children who would join me on travels and building memories and businesses and adventures together. And I just feel like it hasn't panned out the way I hoped. But in the macro, I'm sitting here at an airport waiting for my bags, and I'm missing my boys, and I'm wishing they were with me, and I'm also preoccupied about paying the bills, and I wonder if I'll ever find love again, or someone who wants to travel and explore the world. Obviously, it weighs heavy in my mind, and it's funny, the night I arrived at my hotel in Reno after a long drive through the Sierra Mountains, after I picked up the car in San Francisco, I had a full circle moment with the doorman, reminding me of where I came from and what life used to be. I'm reflecting on what I thought it might have been. And now, taking a little pit stop in Montreal to see my parents before I head back, and I worry about all the time I didn't get to spend with them, and especially with their grandkids, not being able to see them that much because of the distance and the cost of travel and the cost of living and every barrier that flew up that we couldn't overcome. And I just wonder how much time is left, how little money there is to make travel happen these days. Sometimes I wish I could freeze time, and sometimes I wish I could speed it up if something brighter lies ahead. It's just hard to see what that is at the moment. But after this trip, I'll sort of be back where I started, living under the same roof as Max with the boys, hustling, looking for opportunity, trying to find hope in each day, and I'll probably go spend some more time in the woods. Anyway, let's see what happens in the next month. Wow, it's third week of June 2025 as I record this, and I think in April I recorded a time capsule like the one I'm about to record, and I'm sitting in the same spot. I'm sitting on a log in the woods where I walk my dog, and this is where I recorded an episode, a time capsule rather. And since April, so much has changed, yet nothing's changed at all. And what I mean by that is my youngest son turned 10. My oldest son's about to be 13 in August. July's a week away, but my dad's birthday is next week, and he's going to be 83. And I, if you haven't already, there's an episode I recorded with him. I think it's episode 31, called The Triumph of Wills. And I was privileged enough to record that with my dad because I was over in the US on business, and I was able to dogleg back through Canada. But the lovely client that I had in Nevada, who was kind enough to take me to Lake Tahoe and other places while I was over before I saw my dad again, has sadly had to pull the project we were working on, which is a bit frustrating in terms of, as a consultant, having a project cancelled. But I'm optimistic, and we're still friends with that client. And otherwise, I'd sort of back to trying to find entrepreneurial opportunities here in the UK. Our house has been on the market for nearly a year. So we listed our house last July. We've had 3 different estate agents in that time, and we've had about 6 viewings and not one offer. So it's difficult. We were divorced, separated the year before, put the house up for sale last summer, officially divorced last fall, as in we filed everything with the court. We're no longer a married couple and we have a financial order in place. And I think we had ambitions of selling the house within 3 months and moving on with our lives, and that hasn't happened. And so that presents a whole unique set of tensions for the kids, especially, who I think about the most. What's it like being them right now? And my youngest son and I often get out and do stuff together when we can, but lately it's been too hot. And we still take advantage of the beautiful village we live in by going to the swimming pool and doing tennis club and biking and going to the pub and, that whole lifestyle. So I am grateful for that. I'm grateful for health. I'm grateful for much else. However, every day is a battle. As an entrepreneur, as a parent, as an ex, what does dating look like? I keep whirling that around in my head. How do I date again? I haven't been on the dating scene in nearly 2 decades, among other things. But out of all of that has come some amazing friendships as well. So one episode I did was with John, the American, who we met on the way to Seville. So we're still friends. We still see each other. We still help each other out. He's going through a lot of what I'm going through, except his location is the US, although he's leaving here, the UK, fairly soon. So I'm trying to just take stock and say, right, there's a few opportunities on the horizon as an entrepreneur. I still don't know where I'm going to live. I still don't know how far away from my kids it's going to be. I still don't know how all that's going to work and what happens when you meet new partners and stuff. And a lot of people coach me who've been through it and say, oh, it's wonderful. But I don't know if any of them have had to stay in a home for nearly 2 years, knowing full well that their relationships ended. And what does that say about the economy? Globally, UK, there's still, at the time I'm recording this, Iran's just bombed Israel, and Israel's retaliated, and that seems to be a never-ending story. But what's going on in the world? Where are the opportunities for me, for my children, for even my ex? And these are the thoughts that keep me up at night, while we just try and do the day-to-day, and I end up walking the dog on my own. So who knows where this is going to go and what's going to happen next. But I'm going to get up each day and try my best and connect with people that bring me joy and do things that bring me joy. And I think that's the best I can do for now. Everything else has to radiate from that. So let's see what happens over the remainder of the summer, the fall, heading into the winter. See if we can sell this house, because it's the last thing we need to do before we can move on. It's the end of July 2025, and my iPhone's port has stopped working, so I can only charge it or listen to stuff with wireless, so that's kind of annoying. But I wanted to just take a moment, because I barely have any but at the moment, but it's weird, because I'm on what probably is going to be the last family holiday to this caravan park that we always go to every year. It's called Haven and Seashore, and since I can remember, we've taken the kids to this spot. They love it. They love the arcades. They love the games. They love the caravan. And this time we've got a lovely seafront view, which is we haven't had in the past. We've usually been, I guess you can say, inland, if that's the right word. But I just don't know where to begin. I think I've recorded some episodes in the woods near my house. I think one in a hotel room in Reno. And now I'm sitting on a beach near Great Yarmouth, which is the sort of northeastern part of the UK. And it's weird because we're still a family, but we're divorced, and we're still stuck under the same roof because we can't sell our house. So it's all a bit bizarre, and I don't know when there'll be a break, when something will give. I think on my businesses, things are going well. Certainly I'm as stable as I can be, but then again, we're still running a house together, and we're not separate, and we're still paying bills, and I don't know. I look back and I just worry about what's going to happen from here. If the house sells in the next month or few months or whatnot, great, we can move on. But if not, we're spending another Christmas together, and it was supposed to have been our last Christmas 2 Christmases ago as a family, and we still have squabbles. And it's very interesting because my oldest son, who's going to be 13 next month, is exactly the same as my ex-wife, and my youngest son, who's 10, is very similar to me. So we have one of each. But it flares up. We still have weirdly, marital fights, and for my side, I don't understand why. But I still try to be as kind as I can be, and a lot of people think I'm crazy, and a lot of people say, storm out, go out, and who wins? You know what I mean? Even if we can't get along as roommates, as it were, you still got to find the strength to to teach your kids some values, to be kind to people, even if they've done you wrong, even if they've lied about you, even if they've exaggerated certain things. You just have to try and find it in you to do the best in a bad situation. And that's what I find I'm doing. And as many of my friends say, you're crazy for going on a holiday with your ex. It's interesting. A friend of mine has just got divorced, but it's the most amicable thing I've ever seen. They're like super friendly. They still go out as a family. They do stuff together. And of course, that is the ideal, that you can be that way. I don't know what's going to happen when they start talking about the finance and the legals, but we'll see. For now, everything's cool, and they're putting the kids first, which is, I think, what you should do if you can, is put your kids first. So it's weird, one morning I snapped on my son because he was being really rude, and hours later it was buying me a friendship bracelet at a market. And it just seems that sort of symbolic of what's happening. It's just lots of ups and downs at the moment, and just got to weather the storm and try and enjoy the micro moments and create what memories you can with the time you have. But I just hope something changes soon. It's been months and months and months. This living situation's dragged on. We all just need to move on and set up our own space and our own vibes and just start to be our own people again. But it just seems to be evasive at the moment, and it's not healthy for anyone. Anyway, let's see what happens. I've got a few irons in the fire now. Let's see what grows. And I suppose the only way I will fade out is I'm sitting by the sea now, so this is what it sounds like, and hopefully this reminds me to just breathe once in a while. So it's the 8th of September, 2025, and wow, a whole lot has happened in the past week. On one hand, the job that my son and I had delivering the papers for 2.5 years for our local shop has come to an end in a rather dramatic fashion. The shopkeeper, named Wendy, was trying to sell her shop, and I tried to help her. She misunderstood something and had a massive explosion and asked that my son and I stop doing the paper round after 2.5 years. So every day, my oldest son and I would get up, get on a scooter 7 days a week, and go around the village. Now, on one hand, the paper round was declining. People have passed away, but also some people have just opted not to subscribe to the newspaper anymore. But for my son, it was a source of income. He would make £39 a week, which is good for his age. And it would allow him to do things he wanted and buy tech and other stuff. So it's horrific that it's come to an end. However, I did find out after the event that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes than I anticipated, and I think the business is in distress. And certainly the paper round was declining anyway, so there's two ways to look at it. Either it came to an end prematurely, or we had longer than we expected. So I don't quite know where I land on that, but today's the first day in 2.5 years I'm waking up and not doing the paper round. And it's just a bit weird. Things at home are tense. We're still living together. It's been 14 months. We've had a viewing and a second viewing on our home, but no offers. And even if offers came in, there's a period of negotiation and there's possibly a chain. And so there's all that ahead of us. And I have no idea how that will go, but also if things don't happen in the fall, then we head into Christmas, and it'll be our third Christmas together as a divorced couple, still living in the same house. Money's tight for both of us for a number of reasons, so we're sort of fighting for survival at the moment on that front, which is tough because you have to run finances with someone you're divorced from because you live under the same house and have joint liability. So that's not great. that's not great. But as I'm walking and recording this, the sun's shining. It still feels a little bit summery, although it's ended. And my youngest son is now going into year 6, so next year's high school for him. And the world's kind of topsy-turvy at the moment. I have no idea still where I'm going to live next, who I'm going to live with, how I'm going to live. All of that is still a mystery to me. And I can't make a move without knowing what we're going to do with the house. So I'm just hoping there'll be some change. I'm planting some seeds. I'm trying different things. But I am at least grateful that I'm still with my children at this age. I'm still grateful that we're all under the same roof, that I get to see them every morning, even if they're grumpy. And I know this time will evaporate at some point. So I just have to enjoy it while I can and live in the moment and be present. And that's all I can offer right now, aside from being entrepreneurial and trying new things and planting new seeds and seeing what grows. So let's see what happens in the next couple of months, what might change. But losing that paper round was quite dramatic. Quite dramatic.
Hey Nav, welcome to the SparkHub podcast.
What's going on, brother? Good to be here.
Well, this is the first time you've seen me in the UK.
Jolly old England.
You made it all the way from Canada, haven't you?
Yeah, indeed.
So I guess let's start with, when did you first meet me?
Okay, so let's go back. Let's take it to, we're in elementary school, Spring Garden Elementary. I think initially kindergarten starts and you're coming to school. So now we're in like grade 2, right? So kindergarten is kind of like you're getting used to school. You come to school every day, and then you get to know the kids, and then you're in a class with a bunch of kids. So you ride out the year with them, year 1, year 2. So we're in grade 2 now. You know who are the kids that you're in your class every day, so you know who you're expecting to see. And I remember it was this one morning, and we're kind of like, it's announced that, okay, you know what, kids, we're gonna have a new classmate. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? You know, like this new kid's coming, and then on top of it, it's like the story was like, well, you know, actually, he's from England. I don't know if that was announced, but it becomes apparent later, right? I'm just giving you the memory because I'm thinking about it right now. But the memory as I have it was, we have a new classmate. His name is Alan. I don't think the fact that you were from England was mentioned, but I think it became apparent because your appearance on some level spoke to that. And I'm saying that, like, when I see this kid, you know, we're all like, this is in the 80s, I would imagine, right? Imagine back then when hairstyles were just whatever the hell your formation your hair grew in. That was hairstyles in the 80s, right? So I just see this kid. He had scruffy, kind of dirty blonde hair, straight, I would say, but kind of just, you didn't need to comb it back in those days. It was the way that it grew. And what was distinct about you was 2 things. You were wearing a blazer on the first day of this grade 2 class. You were wearing a tweed blazer, maybe even, with patches on the elbows, okay? Like you were some young professor or some shit. And then number 2, which I particularly liked, you had a briefcase. You did not have a book bag or a backpack. You had a briefcase. And that's what you brought to school in grade 2. And that was the first appearance. And okay, class, welcome Alan to the class. And I remember like us just kind of like walking around and be like, check this guy out. Who's this kid? You know? And I think that was the day we met. In grade 2, you were introduced. And, you know, kids flock to something that's new. So we're all kind of circling you and analyzing you and hearing the way you speak and asking you questions. And I don't think like I particularly did anything. Like, I might have came in and asked you a few questions and went off and hung out with whoever I was hanging out with. But the fact of the matter was you were interesting because you were different, right? So we got to talking and I got to know you and like one thing led to another, right? Like we were friends, but our cycle of our friendship was interesting because it wasn't, we would see each other, but then off we went and had our own kind of existence outside of what was going on in life. So there was a period in elementary where we hung out, but then off we went. And maybe we weren't always in the same grade, or sorry, not same grade, in the same class, but we always kept touch. In high school, I feel like there was a renewal where there was another phase where we hung out again. And I think it's just because suddenly we were in each other's classes again. And that might have been in like, I don't know if it was 7, 8, somewhere around then where I felt like we were, you know. And the funny thing is same thing. Later in high school, we kind of branched off. We didn't hang out as much. And then in college, there was probably a period because we always stayed in touch in different periods that was kind of the interesting thing about our friendship, was that like we bumped into each other, we knew what was going on, we were always friends. I was kept aware of what was going on in your life, and here we are. We're both two guys about approaching the big 5-0, and here we are having a conversation about like when we met. So there you have it. I think that's when we met.
Wow. I don't remember the tweed jacket. I don't remember having a British accent, and I certainly don't remember the briefcase. But my memory was grade 2 is when I moved to the city or to the suburbs. And before that, I was living in the country. And before that, I was living in Korea.
Yeah.
So that was, until I met you, that was my story. So I just trying to remember how I was feeling at the time. But all I remember is we played Transformers all the time.
You were particularly known for having like Transformers at that time. For maybe like the listener who's not aware, there was this thing where they would get a bunch of Transformers together that would transform into an even bigger Transformer robot. And you, like, I'm telling you, in my household, I had maybe a few Transformers, but they were the odd little Transformer I got here and there. You had like every member that made that big Transformer. And that was kind of like, oh my God, like we would get one. You had the 5 that made the 1 into the Super Transformer. And I remember that was like, holy shit, like someone has them all. So that was another reason where I saw like our peers congregating to whether it was your house or wherever it was to be like, yo, those Transformers, like Alan's the guy. He's got the whole set. Let's go and play at his house.
Yeah, I was big into Transformers, but I tell you what, aside from that memory, one that I don't know if you remember this, so tell me if this rings a bell. My dad got something called a Hyperion computer, and it was a flat computer. It had a tiny little screen that was only in orange text, and it had 2 disk drives, and you pulled the keyboard out the bottom, and it had a big handle on the top so you could transport it. And I remember I had that at home, and I was learning to code and like do DOS and stuff, and I remember bringing it to school to show and tell. And you were one of the first kids to run up, and we sat there for hours putting the discs in different drives and like learning how to type stuff, and we just sort of geeked out together. And I think my memory of our friendship, aside from Transformers, was that you and I are always running the same sort of software at the same time, the same games at the same time. And I think you and I used to swap floppy disks, didn't we? And I had
a low-key business, let me tell you, on the side, where whatever software you had and I got to borrow it from you, I was low-key like selling it to like different kids in the neighborhood. Like, okay, Alan, you gonna lend me this? Okay, great. And that was my hookup to be like, oh, you need this? Okay, no problem. I got some floppy disks and I'll copy you this particular game or whatever it was. But I also know that like in elementary, I don't know, and I'm messing up the dates, but CD-ROM, you were also on the cusp of CD-ROM technology. Like a video where like, oh, that's a leopard running? Holy shit. Whereas normally we were just seeing like such basic VGA graphics in that era when CD-ROM hit the scene. We're like, what, an actual video with audio? So I feel like, yes, we got introduced to technology at a very interesting time in the world where like multimedia was really like coming to be a thing where like, wow, it wasn't just little block pixelated type content. Like we were on the verge of getting to, and I'm just marveling at the fact of like where we're at today compared to then. And yet we were really like at the beginning of it. And you're right. Our friendship was that like we were both enthralled by technology at that time and seeing it evolve before our eyes. And it was the littlest thing to where we're at now. You're right. Like our love of seeing innovation kind of take place in front of us was part of our childhood.
But it was not only that. Now, first of all, am I going to get any commission from these long overdue sales or what?
right. No, yeah, indeed, right.
But I do remember
compounded.
I do remember when the CD-ROM first came out, and they were very noisy, if you remember. Like they whirred and they made noise. And you came to my house, and we were putting it in, and it was like an encyclopedia product. And like you said, it was the first form of multimedia and we thought it was magic that you could, like, there was this video of a leopard, right, and you could jump around. And then we got into the games like Wing Commander, I think, and some of these other ones.
Yeah, Ultima Underworld.
The
Stygian Abyss.
Yes. How many hours do you think we lost to that game?
So what was cool about that was in that era, it was all about when you got a game like the box, you needed the box. And that's why you were also a key player in my business, because The way they did copyright protection back in the day was there was probably in the manual, you needed to have a keyword in a particular part of the manual in order to get into the game or whatever it was. And like, if you just copy the game, you don't have the manual. So it's like oftentimes my customers needed those copyright words or phrases. Like, oh, Alan, actually, let me borrow the guidebook for that particular game so that I could provide that service to whoever I had copied and sold that game to. So it's just funny to me to think back to that time.
But do you remember in my basement, we had a bar, and I had all the games on display.
Yes.
Against the wall. And
Sierra.
Sierra
was the company, right?
Sierra Online, and we played all the quests. You know,
right.
It was solving puzzles and stuff like that. And you and I both, I remember we had graph paper and we would draw maps because you remember you'd move between rooms?
Right. For particular, yes, for that Stygian Abyss, yes.
And Stygian Abyss too, mapping it out. So you and I would always compare notes in class, like, hey, have you been on this level? And by the way, I remember you telling me there's like if you walk down this corridor, like if you look at the third panel on the left, and you tap this, then it'll open a secret room and there'll be a potion in there. And so we used to chat every day about like all these weird discoveries, you know?
Imagination, man. Like, I don't know if it's every generation thinks the subsequent generation like doesn't have the imagination that we had or you have, but I just think back to be like wow, we lived in such a world of imagination. These games, like, there was more than just playing the game. It was the sense of like community of like reading the book that came with it, knowing the characters, talking about it, the secrets of it all. Like, you know, before there was any internet, how are you getting this information? How do you know that this secret whatever thing existed? It was word of mouth. So you needed like a community of people who had games and played, and like, how would you get this information? I don't even remember how we figured things out, but we did because we had the time to mess with it.
Can I tell you what you've revealed to me? Something I haven't known till this moment, which is that you were having a business based on our friendship, which is fine. It's cool, and I love it. It's very entrepreneurial, and I think your energy rubbed off, and now I'm an entrepreneur. However, there were two ways I found these things out. Either it was in conversation with you, and we would just figure it out, or like you would say, I've wandered down this hall, and Alex. So we would collaborate at school, and then we go home and game, or you'd come to my house or whatever.
Yeah.
But do you remember what BBSs were?
Right. Bulletin boards, right?
Bulletin boards. So I used to dial California.
Yes.
And at that time...
Props to your parents for being the type of parents that would allow you to even make these phone calls, because that wasn't happening in my house. And for sure, when you had access, like, I'm accessing this message board and getting this information, that was very cool, man. And you know what? That basement you're telling me, it's coming back to me now, the bar with the games and the setup and all of that. It was definitely an environment that was conducive for these kids to kind of like live in their imagination and explore.
But what was interesting is for those who never know this before, you and I used to use modems, right? And it was connected to your phone line. And of course, in the house, there were several phones. And so what would happen is I'd try and dial these BBSs, but if a call came in or my mom or dad picked up the phone or my brother, it would drop the connection. So I would sometimes wait for the screen to load, and it would go line by line. And of course, you're being billed by the minute, right?
Yep.
And I remember the first time this happened, my dad came home to what would have been a phone bill that would have been 100 times what he expected it to be, because phone calls were free. Yep. And he'd look at the phone bill, and it would come in. Remember our phone bills used to be printed?
Yeah.
And one day he got, usually the phone bill, one sheet came in an envelope. He got a phone bill that came in a letter-size envelope, like a court document.
Oh, it was thick, you're saying?
Thick document, not folded. And he would open it. It was just sheets and sheets of like me dialing this BBS. And he was livid because I don't know what it would have been at the time, but call it $50, $100. That was a lot of money back then. It was 50 cents a hit. And so because you and I had this addiction, or we get stuck in a puzzle, and I think to answer your question, we would take it as far as we could, and we would try and guess, and we'd draw stuff up. But there was a point where we're like, I can't figure this out. Actually, there's another way I did it. So the BBS was number one. But do you remember hint books?
Yes.
Where you had a marker?
No, you had a particular marker that revealed something?
That's right. So you'd buy a hint book.
Okay.
So where you got the game, you'd send a check in the mail to California and buy a hint book. And the hint book would come, and it would be plain, but it would have questions like, how do you open this door? How do you kill this ogre? Whatever. It would be, you'd have to go through the hint book and find the particular problem you faced in the game. And you get what looked like a yellow highlighter, and you'd run it over a blank space, and it would reveal the clue. Pick up the rock, throw it, It would walk you through the instructions. And so I don't know if you remember, but you and me figured it out through a combination of expensive BBS,
Yeah.
as well as hint books.
Yeah.
And that's how we cracked through those games.
King's Quest and whatnot.
Yeah,
right?
King's Quest. And Stygian Abyss didn't have a hint book, but I do remember using a BBS and going into like forums.
Till this day, I think like the concept of like runes and rune stones, I feel like I took from that game. And just the notion of what they were, these symbols, this symbolism behind it. And so that's again what I'm saying when it takes me back to like, it's not just imagination, it's being exposed to things that like that's how you like learned about culture and worldly things, because these games were developed by these artists and they really like compiled whatever influences they had and put them in these games, and you were like, you had no clue while playing that you were learning about things until later in life you would see, and oh yeah, that's a rune and that's a certain symbol and it represents this, and there it was a very interesting way to learn.
But what I'll say is there was an element of disappointment where as I got older, and I mean I played King's Quest, Police Quest, Space Quest, Hero Quest, I had all the quests.
Yeah.
But when I got older, I realized basically they were all just Greek mythology reheated.
Right.
It was the same characters. It was Medusa. It was it was the Hydra Dragon and all that kind of stuff. And so I think what was interesting about our childhood is we went in through these crude games that we had to think, and we had to. I mean, let's face it. Just getting the game to boot up, as you said, was you had to have a code. You had to crack it. You had to have DRM protection unlocked. You had to do all these things just to get to the game. So you learned coding and you learned how to navigate a computer. Then you'd get to the game itself. If you were lucky, it would boot up. Then you would solve problems. And you go through all of that. And then later on in life, you find out actually they've just taken a bunch of stories that exist already and reheated it. But that's what I love about it is I look back now that I'm 48 going, oh my gosh, that all the stuff we learned was reheats, but it's what we have to do with our life. What is the stories of our lives that we're heating up for our kids? We're in this land of AI now, in this land of technology that's completely different.
So tell me, which Greek mythological figure was represented by Leisure Suit Larry?
I'm pretty sure there's a Greek god that's the god of leisure.
Sure.
I don't know. That was that's a fair point. But I'll give you an example. Space Quest was Star Wars, essentially mixed with Star Trek. It was a blend of these two tropes. You know what I mean? And then King's Quest was based on King Arthur.
Oh no, I'm just busting your balls. But I'm saying that was a classic series,
Suit Larry.
Right?
But I'll tell you something else. I don't know if you remember this. Where we grew up in the province of Quebec, whatever the standard was in the U.S. and the other provinces of Canada for ratings, like let's say it's PG or 13 or whatever, Quebec would cut it in half.
Okay.
Do you remember that?
Okay. No, I didn't. Yeah.
So for example, Leisure Suit Larry was rated in, let's say, Ontario or the U.S. as 18.
Okay.
And in Quebec, it was rated 10. So we were playing an adult game way too young.
Right. Exactly.
But it was also the same reason.
And I'm saying we were learning things that we shouldn't have through that game, through the cultural references. But that's what childhood was back in the 80s, right? You got access to content that was, somewhat illicit. It was like, how did you get that? And to be honest, bringing it back to the illicit side business I was running, the Leisure Suit Larry series was quite popular amongst the guys back in the day. Oh, part 3 you got? 3 discs, man? No problem. Let's copy it. Let's get it done.
Amazing. But I do remember, too, this is sort of a tangent, but like movies like RoboCop came out.
Yeah.
Very violent graphic films, and they were knocked down to 10 or 11 in Quebec. And I got in, and I remember must have been 12 or 13 years old, watching a film that was probably meant for an 18-year-old and coming out radically scarred from it because it was a brutal film.
Yeah.
But
I'll buy that for $1.
I'll buy that for $1, exactly. Well, I'll buy Nav's games for $1,
yeah,
clearly.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to look back now and say, like, what are the things that we did back then that come forward into how we're facing life today? And I guess just to jump ahead, it's been a long time since you've seen me in a tweed jacket, and it's been a long time since, we were 8 years old. But 40 years later, like, I'm looking back on my childhood, and if I'm honest with you, Nav, everything we went through is keeping me sane right now, because it's been a dark couple of days for me personally, and I'm just trying to, what lifts me up is long-time friendships. It's the memories of the things we did. It's the innovation. And I think for me now, I'm looking back going, I'm still in this mode of problem solving. How do I map my way out of this dungeon?
Yeah.
How do I map my way out of this? How do I use a runestone? How do I level up?
Right.
So all of this stuff we learned as kids has kept me sane. And I guess now it's time to talk about something that happened to me a couple days ago, which is the first time it's happened to me. And just to cut to the chase, I had a panic attack and I collapsed. And just for context, in the time leading up to it, it's been about 16 months that my ex and I have been living together under the same roof with the kids. We haven't sold the house yet, or at the time we hadn't, but there's some good news on that in a second. And money keeps changing, the landscape keeps changing, the expectations keep changing, the kids are growing older. We thought we'd be out of there in 3 months, and now it's been 16 months. And just a whole series of things were piling on top of me, and I had to seek extra work. And one day, Tuesday, a couple days ago now, it all caught on top of me, and all I remember is getting back from working a day with a friend who has a gardening business, and getting out of the van, and everything was a bit woozy. And then I just, next thing I know, people were picking me up off the ground, and I was in tears, and I felt like I was being strangled, and I felt just nothing but anxiety. I couldn't think about going back to my house. And thankfully, my friends picked me up, took me inside, calmed me down, made me a meal, lit a fire, and I just, the world calmed down. I stayed the night away at my friend's house, and I said to my ex at the time, I'm not going to come home till I see a doctor. And during that time from the time I sort of fainted until the time 24 hours later, when I saw a doctor who said, essentially, you've had a panic attack and everything's fine physiologically, but mentally, how you doing? And I had to admit, I wasn't good. And now it's 72 hours removed from that incident. And in that time, we've sold our house. And we now potentially have a moving date. And now, finally, after being in purgatory now for a very, very long time, I'm starting to revert to what we did as kids. I'm starting to think in maps now. I'm starting to look at options. I'm starting to look for cheat codes. I'm starting to figure out what I want to do. Where does the game go from here? What dungeons can I explore? What tools can I buy? And I have to say, Nav, it's just a miracle that at the time this happened, you happened to be coming through the UK.
Yeah.
You've reminded me where I come
persevere?
from. Yeah. Just roots. I mean, when you know someone as long as you and I have known each other, it's sometimes we can talk without talking.
Yeah.
We have the same reference points. But I just want to say to anyone listening, if you have anything like what I've experienced, like everything, the world just piles on top of you, and you get to a point where your brain just hits a kill switch. Talk to an old friend. And I think, you and I talk sporadically, but the fact that you're passing through the UK and now we're sitting here in a car doing a podcast together after 40 years of friendship it's just strengthened me, and it's reminded me that I can get out of this. I can find a way forward, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and to persevere. And so I just wanted to sort of get a record of what's happening. And obviously, I had to tell my children what happened, and that was brutal enough to have to go home after not seeing them for 2 days and say, Daddy just fell over and couldn't get up.
If you had to outline the build-up, what were the biggest factors? You've never had an episode like this ever happen to you before?
No, I've never fainted before in my life.
Okay, interesting.
It's a good question. I mean, I think what happens is I've always been and you tell me if I've got this wrong, I've been an overpleaser. I like it when people around me are happy, and I'll go out of my way to make people happy, and that includes people that aren't really I'm not even supposed to be responsible anymore, and I mean that in the nicest possible terms, but I feel responsible, even though I'm divorced, even though I'm still living with my ex. I feel responsible to still be available to my children and make money and pay the bills, and the landscape has changed financially in that bills have gone up and income's gone down, and that's a stress for anybody. But on top of that, it's prospects and not being able to get out and maybe explore as much as I want to, or have meetings or seek other opportunities. So I got stuck in a rut, and then I had to take on extra work to try and get me out of that rut. And I just took on way too much and felt way too much guilt, and it all just came crashing down on me. And that's what was building up. And I think where I learned 3 things after my collapse, and this was gained through knowledge of other friends that I went to see within 24 hours who advised me. One of them said, look, Alan, this is just not sustainable. This environment is killing you because you're just trying to please too many people at once that, frankly, don't believe your narrative. So that's number one. Number two was you have to be very focused on your responsibilities. What are you legally and financially responsible for and emotionally responsible for? Because you can't do it all. And then the last thing was to take action and make a few plans and figure your way out of this, because actually your priorities have now changed. You were prioritizing earning money to pay bills, to keep a family under a roof until such time as your house sold. As the house price is dropping by huge amounts. So I'm now looking at this going, that was supposed to be a nest egg, and now it's not going to be a nest egg. So that was stressful. But ultimately, I think
stop prioritizing yourself.
I stopped prioritizing myself and my own mental health. And it's a domino effect, because even when you're divorced with children, if you fall down, everyone downstream of you falls down. And I realized that I had to just now be focused on
You know what?
my
And
mental
also,
health.
I would add, like, I'm newly a dad to my daughter for the last year and a half. I think the notion of what does it mean to be a dad? Oftentimes, does anyone really define it for you? It's different. Like we're coming from, what you necessarily received from your parent. With the world changing so much and the dynamics of the world, fatherhood in itself has kind of evolved in different ways too. And yes, that there is that classic notion of like, yes, father knows best, dad, I'll take care of it all, da 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 da. But to the degree of, when the world is falling, to what extent does the responsibility lie to solve all problems, right? Like it's the idea of finding that balance. Like we're fallible, we're human, and I think that's kind of the point of like saying, yeah, you might not know necessarily what's the best way to kind of react to a situation, to the point where you realize you find yourself in a situation where you're like, damn, I didn't realize I'm as overwhelmed as I thought I was.
I would add to that, though, because you asked me the question, what were the contributing factors? And I'd say in the micro, it was everything I described: financial worry, emotional worry, legal worry. When you divorce someone, you have basically a binding contract that you have to stick to. Now, that doesn't flex with the economy. It doesn't flex with the housing market. It doesn't flex. Well, it can if you write it the right way, but we didn't write a contract between us. And I'm trying to navigate legal lenses, financial lenses, and emotional lenses. But I'll add one thing else, which you made me think of. What is it to be a dad today?
Yeah.
And we grew up in an era where the dad went out to work and with one salary provided the life that we had, including paying for BBS downloads, right?
Indeed.
And holidays and a cottage in the mountains. And that was one man, one salary. And my dad worked 5 days a week, and he'd sometimes come home for lunch, but he was always home by 5, 6 o'clock. And then on the weekends, we'd be gone.
The roles were very different. Yeah,
the roles were very different. But that was our template, right?
Yeah.
So now we apply it to the era of, and I'm very rarely on social media, but when I do go on, my feed is full of just, the best way I could describe it is angry man content. We're not men anymore. There's this guy named Andrew Tate who's out there who's got a lot of following, and he's just talking about how we need to return to traditional roles, women in the kitchen, that kind of stuff, which, by the way, I don't subscribe to. However, what I am finding is now there's, whether it's a man or a woman, we're holding gambling devices in our hand and we're comparing our lives to fiction. And that's, I think, an expectation.
Yeah. It's a huge cultural shift that's occurred
in the macro.
Yeah.
That the micro's tough enough, dealing with kids' emotions, dealing with them growing up, dealing with them figuring out the world, trying to help them, trying to be there for them, all of that. But on top of which, there's this whole culture change that's literally being fed to you in an algorithm.
Yeah.
And I find that might have contributed more than anything, is that
the expectations, you're saying.
Well, things that you'll never measure up to.
Yeah.
And like I said, and it's the best way I can describe it, is it's like you have a gambling machine in your hand that is showing you fiction and saying this is what you should have. Men and women, by the way. I'm not taking sides on the matter, but I think that had a lot to do with it. I think COVID was, if you want, depending how far back you want to draw the timeline, being cooped up for 2 years at crucial, ages was not easy. And then you can't afford the lifestyle you have. And I think that all just crashed down on me. And I had to say, well, what can I control? Yeah. Actually, not much.
It is an interesting time. The world's going through a lot of different changes. It's hard to pinpoint it. I don't think it comes down to one particular social movement, but I think there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving pieces. And yeah, the culture has shifted. And then the notion is like you're saying, people getting their content, like, should you necessarily be getting advice from talk radio, essentially. You know what I mean? Like, how qualified are the people who are giving their opinions? And here we are kind of doing the same thing, but I see this more as just two people talking about like where they are in life and what's happening and what's the zeitgeist of the moment, right? Like we started this talking about when we were kids, and then okay, boom, we're shifted to like being adults and saying, okay, well, how are we managing our current day stresses? How are expectations to manage the next generation, our kids? The first question is, well, were our parents dealing with the same thing in their era? What were the factors at that time? And it's like if you compare the worlds, there's always chaos. There's always something going on in every era. But technology has definitely, like, on the one hand, it's a great tool, but it's also exasperated so many of these issues that everyone's facing at the same time. Like, thinking back again, I give props. Our social media was TV, right? Kids of the 80s, I watched TV. I learned so many cultural references, just like with the games. But there's a good and a bad from it, right? We're talking about ratings. You were saying, like, what was rated. It's our society saying, like, this is what's appropriate for this kid. But kids are going to always look to break the rules. You always want to get the content that isn't meant for you before and without anyone knowing, type of thing, right? And now we have such an abundance of content and what's the moderation of it, you know? Like, there's too much noise, I guess is what I'm saying. And so we're in such a distracted world.
I agree. And I would add one other thing. I was thinking about this on the back of watching a comedy special by Chris Rock. And he said he was married for 16 years, which is about the same amount of time I was married. He said, but our 16 years in the modern era is like 40 years of the previous era, because the mom and dad would kiss goodbye in the morning, and the father would not see his family for 8 hours or 12 hours.
Yeah.
And he made a joke. He said if one of the kids died, the dad wouldn't find out till he got home from work because there was no contact. Yeah. But now, and this goes back to my relationship too, the minute I walked out the door, we're texting constantly, we're on social media, we're posting stuff, we're liking, haven't you liked my comment, you've been 5 minutes. There's
real time is real time.
Real time is like you're constantly connected. So there's not really anything to talk about when you get home after work because you've already had the conversation.
We're overdosed. Even the medium in which we communicate, it's not direct. A text message does not convey, but yet it's so useful. So you're getting a lot of data. You're getting it all sent to you live during your day. So that's probably a lot of the things that adds to the compounding of that stress daily that we're not aware of. All day long, this feed of content, information, the state of global politics, you know, a relative going through whatever, you know what I mean? There's constantly just an influx of data coming your way.
It's like a ticker, you know, the old news tickers that just but it's your personal life, and then you're following other people, and then and I found this, and I don't know if you find this, there's people I know that are these social media hounds, and they portray this life, and then you meet them in reality, and you're like, the two don't line up.
Right,
But
it's a persona.
It's a persona, it's a front. And I never really got into it, but I know other people do, and I know other people are sort of affected by it. So where I'm going with this is what caused me to faint was probably, like I said, in the micro, what everyone faces, money troubles, stresses.
Yeah.
In the macro, it's this whole culture change, and I'm trying to navigate it with two young souls, an ex-wife, a legal arrangement, a financial arrangement, an emotional arrangement, and it's just, there's nowhere to stand where it will be stable. Everything just falls over, and then the next day it's a complete other thing. But at the same time, you feel like you're not moving because you're stuck in a house and you can't get out, and it's the routines are the same. So like, I think that's what caused me to collapse. And as I said, now it's, as I come up for air, it's, you know what, I've just got to keep it simple now.
Yeah.
You know, I rarely use my phone. I rarely look at it unless it's for, you know, to keep in touch with people at work. Social media, I'll do 10 minutes a day, but I actually feel gross. I'd rather do something else. And now I listen to, you know, well, I have been listening to podcasts for a while, and now I've created one. But I don't know, Nav. I don't know where to go from here, where the next branch is. But I what I retain is my optimism, and I just reflect on everything we've talked about, and I just know that there's levels to this, you know. And there's other levels that you can achieve and unlock, and maybe there's magic spells if you want to be symbolic, and runes. But you just got to keep going, and that's
balance, brother. That's what I could tell you. I don't know what that means and what it is. I think it's different for everyone, but balance. How, you know, and that's what I'm saying. We're in that era of there's too much data out there. There's too much noise.
Yeah.
You know, and the strategy was, now it's like, oh, find the right filter. That's kind of the problem, right? There's too much content that needs to be filtered through. So everyone's got to find that balance. How do you get the right information? Like, and we're not even in the information age anymore. We're in the misinformation age. And with AI, it's going to be compounded even more. So how do you trust the content that you get when the very nature of it is meant to be exploitive and altered in forms to glamorize everything that's being presented your way?
How do you be a father in the age of bad incentives is my question. So how do I guide my children when I know they're just getting personal content and algorithms, but at the same time I can't exactly, like, I would never impose on them bans that my parents never imposed on me. But at the time, going back, my parents probably didn't know Leisure Suit Larry was about picking up chicks.
Right.
They wouldn't have known that. They would have just looked at the box cover and thought it was a funny character.
So I think trial by fire is balance. Maintain the human connection. The kids are going to always be out there and get what they're going to get, just like we do. But if you overindulge in any particular anything, right, you're going to have a bad result. It's moderation. Tell me how adults are moderating the content and the data and the level and the quality of the data that's coming and the information that's coming. We're not. It's flying at you so unfiltered. It's so biased in so many ways, which, think about it, the average conversation derails into some sort of like political debate when, like, does that really, there's so much that's in conflict at the same time that you could try to have a conversation about one thing, but all these other movements of ideas and thoughts come in, and the conversation becomes a debate about something completely else. So I say the balance you have to find is the human aspect of things. Yes, sure, listen to your podcast, but you know what? Also talk to someone. I guess that's a little bit of what this is. Like, you reached out and we spoke, but then it wasn't until we saw each other in person that we had a conversation that led to us having better understanding of, like, hey man, how are you? You're okay? Okay, let's take it from there.
Well, what's missing is 90% of communication's body language, and we've been cut off from that. But now we're sitting here looking at each other.
Right.
So I have a proposal for you, and it's something that people do in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go to the pub?
Let's do it.
All
you know what? We'll put a pause on this conversation, and this is a good intro. What we'll do is we'll hit the pub, and then part 2 of this conversation will be post pubs, and to see, does this alter our attitude or our opinion on how to kind of solve some of these issues that we're even talking about.
I think that's a great idea, and maybe we could go sell some floppy disks too. What do you think? All right, Nav, so we're at the pub. We've had a couple drinks. We've had a deep conversation.
Yes.
Where does this end?
Where it ends. You know what? My cautionary tale to everyone, that crazy old man, like, trying to warn about the parakeet in the mine?
The canary in the coal mine.
The canary, that's it. That's what I was trying to get at. Is the tool of the day is technology, and the currency is information, and data is the flow, right? We were speaking earlier about balance. To find balance means there's too much noise, I don't know what to listen to. So how do you balance that? It's the same thing like anything. If your diet is too much of anything in any kind of way, you become what you eat.
So if you eat too many carrots, you go orange.
We're consumption based. We're consuming too much of everything. We've lost sight of everything. So how do you focus in on anything? Well, narrow it down. Find the important things. Keep it analog. Keep it personal. Be direct. Be honest.
Go to the pub.
How do you determine that something is honest? Have a connection. What's the human connection? That's the short Crib Notes version of... And what does that mean? I don't know. What I'm saying is abstract. You know what? It's funny. I would have thought that after going to the pub, we would be more relaxed, but we had points, and I feel like a little bit more charged up about the topics that we're talking about now, in particular, because it's like the filter, if you will, is off to say, sure, you know what? While you have a brave front of being open to, like, what are the challenges of the day, everyone faces a challenge. And I think the grounding thing is if you maintain your humanity, it's when you're direct, you're open, you're honest, you feel calm, there's no trickery going on. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to you directly. I have no reason to bullshit you. In this age where there's too much noise, too much of everything, how do you trust anymore? So I think everyone's nervousness, that anxiety, is from the notion of just being nervous all the time because you can't trust anything anymore. So where do you find trust from? It's from the bonds and connections that you have built through actual interactions, good relationships.
Connective tissue. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the only way I could try to tie this all in together, in some hope of like having aspirations to say, yeah, you know what? Okay, it's getting a little tough. No problem, but we'll navigate. We'll get through the storm.
We'll map it out like we used to. We'll map it out like we used to.
And we'll find the solution. We'll find the pathway through, and then we'll be old, and then we'll hopefully not be cantankerous and complaining about it. We'll be optimistic for the next generation, and we'll watch them do well as well. But look, we haven't reached that point yet. We're not out of the game. We still have the opportunity to go out there and make our lives the way we want them to be. It's an adjustment. We're in an adjustment phase. So I say to humanity, maintain your humanity. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think if I reflect on the past 48 hours since you got here, I had a panic attack, and that was a signal. That was a moment. I've never had one before, and it was scary. But I spoke to my immediate aftermath was talking to people in the flesh, sitting with people, looking in the eyeball and talking. And from one conversation, I gleaned that what I was doing was not sustainable. From the next conversation, I gleaned that I had to be responsible for myself and accountable to myself, and I had to take action. And then the conversations I've had with other people, plus you, have been make a plan and stick to it and keep it simple. Yeah. And if I fall down, everyone falls down. So I think that's what caused me to collapse, is I felt like I was a fulcrum. But I have to be a fulcrum in the right environment, on the right plane. And as you say, I find the whole world right now is spinning. And I put my foot on one tile and it slides, and I put my foot on the next tile and it slides. So I'm going to jump back to solid ground. And let's face it, what's solid ground for you and me? Childhood.
Yeah.
Where we came from, the roots. So I guess my conclusion is the same as yours, is I'm going to try and keep my humanity. I'm going to try and keep my head above water. And
don't wear the weight of the whole world. Like we said earlier, right? The plane's going down. Put that mask on yourself first, so that you're in a position to not crumble and everyone comes crumbling on top of you. The fact that take care of yourself. If you're taking care of yourself, then yes, you are in a better position to take care of those around you.
Put their masks on.
Prioritize. Yeah.
All right, brother. Well, thank you for coming through and seeing me.
100%, man. Long time in the works. I'm glad we finally made some time to make it happen. I guess the world made it happen for us.
It did. It brought us to this moment.
All right, brother.
Thank you for listening. To support SparkHub, please have a look at the show notes below this episode, or visit thesparkhub.com to sign up for our newsletter, which offers exclusive inside scoops. Just quickly, the music you're hearing is composed by Shi Hao Yan, and the audio engineering is done by Emily Chung. My name is Alan, and I hope that you dream big and something sparked in you today.